minute since I've made a video. Actually, it hasn't. I posted a video at the beginning of December, so it's only been like 2 weeks. But like usual, I've been extremely busy again because guess what? I'm moving again. So we're gonna be moving into our new apartment in 2 weeks. But I'm going back home for Christmas this week, so it's really like pack everything now, go home, go to new apartment, and I'm really excited about the new apartment. I can't wait to show it off. The windows are huge, and that brings me so much serotonin. So yeah, you can see that my bookshelf in the background doesn't really have any books on it. They all got packed, so I was gonna like hold up the books and be like, yeah, look at this. But no, that's not gonna happen. They're already packed. So I thought I was gonna do this video in the new year, but just where I read the Red Rising series this year, it felt more right to just kind of end off December and this year with talking about the Red Rising series and how I felt about it, which, if you don't follow me on Goodreads, is very, very good about it. Like, I love this series so much. So to preface, I only read the first 3 books. So that is Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morningstar. That is the original trilogy. There are books after that I'm aware of. You know, they continue the story, but everyone has told me that if I wanted to stop at Morningstar, it's a concise ending, and it's more like you can choose to go on if you want to, which I will do eventually, but right now I have a couple other series I'd like to focus on and a couple other things I'd like to focus on. I love Red Rising, but at the end of it, I had been reading it for like 4 months, and I was just like, I need a break. So I'm excited to come back to those characters later when I'll be more like, oh my god, I miss Severo and I miss Darrow. So yeah, anyways, let's get into the video. So if you don't know what the Red Rising series is about, basically it follows a group, like a colonized society now living on all the different planets of our solar system, and society has spread out from Earth because there was a war on Earth and there was a war on the moon and a bunch of shit happened, and now society is kind of based in classes, and these classes are established by color. So if you're a red, you're kind of at the lowest of the scale, and if you're, I guess an obsidian would be lower than red, but if you're a red, you're really low on the scale of hierarchy in this world, and if you're a gold, you're really high on this scale of hierarchy. That's like the top thing you can be is a gold. And so it brings up this really interesting dynamic of all these different like stairways to become this. Like, you want to be the gold, but you can't become gold. You're born each of these colors, so there's no escaping the class that you're born in, which I thought was really interesting because I had read a book a couple of years ago that was focused on the same thing. It was for my climate fiction class, and I can't remember which one it was, but it had a lot to do with the fact that you're born to die in the class that you're born in. And so seeing that kind of brought here through the representation of colors and being like, you were born a red, you have red augmentations, you can never be anything else but this, and then having the main character rise out of that and become what he became. I thought that was a really interesting kind of class in general and the very like class struggle. So these books are deep as hell. The villains aren't villains. Morningstar is where we get more into the villains and why they do what they do. But Red Rising is the first book in the series, and let's start there before my thoughts get all jumbled and we end up at Morningstar, because I just finished that book and it's all I can think about. The main character of the Red Rising saga and the Red Rising trilogy is a red named Darrow. Darrow is born in the small town of Lycos, and he is an average miner. He's a hell diver, actually, which means he can push the drill to limits that other people can't. So Darrow is already a very interesting special boy that we get to follow as his story develops. So there's gonna be like some, I'm gonna try not to spoil too, I'm gonna spoil everything actually, this is a spoiler video, sorry. So basically, he's living in Lycos. It's a color-coded society. He lives on Mars, and his people, they're told that they're making Mars safe and livable for generations that are gonna come there in about like 400 years or something. I think that might be right. So he is very devoted to this. He sees himself as preparing society to come to Mars and be safe here. And that is a really important job to him. And it's really, he likes it. Like, he's happy with it. And then his wife, Io, is killed for, well, they had been caught in a garden at one point where they didn't have access to, and his wife is killed for various reasons. And so he gets very depressed after she dies, and then he kills himself, and then he wakes up and he's no longer in Lycos anymore, and he's in an overcity of Mars. And he finds out basically that everything he knew from the time he was a child was a lie, and that society had already been built, and he was basically just forced to be a slave underground without any, he had no knowledge that there was an entire world above him that was functioning perfectly. And him and his family and all his friends, they were just being used and told this lie to keep them there so that they would never try to come out of the town that they were stuck in. It was like a way to keep this class enslaved. And that was a really like startling and powerful moment when he realized that. I knew it was coming, but just the way it was described was really intense. I do find the first Red Rising book is the weakest of the trilogy. It does not catch my interest nearly as much as the rest of it, especially with the characters. I love all the characters in this series, including the villains, and I just really couldn't get behind the characters as much in this book other than Darrow. Darrow was so fleshed out that I was like, okay, I see every aspect of him, so I like him. But we didn't get every aspect of other characters until we got more into Golden Sun and we got more into Morningstar especially. So really good book, but as a character reader, having only that attachment to Darrow, it made it hard for me to connect with the other characters when bad things would happen to them or when they would have a change of heart about something. Like, since I am going to spoilers, Cassius betraying Darrow at the end, like, that was really, it felt like it would have been more powerful if we got more insight into Cassius, and I know we get some, but compared to the later books, it's just, especially knowing what Cassius is like in Morningstar, like, I feel like you're looking at this, at Red Rising, the first book, and the characters are great, but knowing what he's capable of, it just makes me wonder what the first book could have been if he had been at that skill level at the time. So when Darrow escapes, he's taken to a rebellion of sorts that is trying to rise up against the Golds, and so the leaders of society, and they are trying to rebel against this color-coded system. And so they end up making a deal with Darrow where he will be disguised as a Gold. They will like remake his biology and build him into a Gold and send him into the Gold school, like the Gold training school or institute. I think it's called an institute. And he will infiltrate it and overthrow the society from within. And this is run by someone named Ares. We don't meet Ares, we only meet Dancer, but Dancer is expected to be Ares. And this is all really interesting and really cool because we're learning about how this society is already sick of itself. The society already wants this to end. We're not building to the fact that Darrow isn't the tipping point, he's just the catalyst. He's not the reason there's a rebellion. He's not what inspired everyone to rebel. They were already rebelling, and they had already tried it without him. He's just another person in the game now. So they bring him to a carver, and he is remade, basically. He's remade to be gold. His entire body is ripped to pieces and then rebuilt. So he no longer has red biology, he has gold biology, which is augmented in so many ways. So he is now this 7-foot tall monster, and he is terrifying. And he's so shocked by himself because he's not the small, meek boy, 16-year-old boy that he was, that held his wife 2 days ago. Now he's this monster, someone he's hated. He's hated the golds for his entire life because of how oppressed they keep the reds. But now he is the monster, and he's fully accepting of being the monster if it means avenging his wife. So he sets off to the Institute. Basically, once everything starts at the Institute, I'm not going to go into any more plot details really, but basically it's kind of a Hunger Games situation where they kind of put a bunch of kids in an arena and they're like, yo, fight, but it's more faction based than it is solo survival. But it was really good. I enjoyed most of the stuff that happened in the survival aspect. I found it really interesting. I thought it was really well done, and I really liked all the characters, even if they weren't as developed as the other books. I loved Cassius. I liked Roke. I loved Severo. I think I'll always love Severo. I don't think there's a single book or a moment where I wasn't like, Severo is my child, and I would do anything for him. But, so they are just in this arena trying to defeat each other to prove that they are better than each other. And my favorite aspect of the first Red Rising book and the entire series is the fact that Darrow is not a good person. He's a good person. He's not your cookie cutter protagonist who is like, I will do good all the time and I am here to serve justice. He is accepting of the fact that to do the things he needs to do, he has to be the monster, and he has to hurt people, and he has to do things that are quite unsavory, and he does them. And holy fuck, these books. Not so much in the first book, really. Again, a lot of the stuff kind of comes in more in Golden Sun and Morningstar. I almost said Morningstar again, or you know what I mean. So in the first book, it's right after his wife died. He's angry and confused, and he's like, why have I been lied to my entire life? Why did you take my wife from me? Why is everything like this? And he's this 16-year-old angsty boy filled with rage. So he's put on this killing field, basically, and unleashed. And while he's being unleashed and murdering people and not caring, because in his head, he's like, they're gold. These people are monsters. I don't need to feel bad for what I do to them because they would do worse to me if they knew what I was. And he's so stuck in that mindset where he's like, I will just kill everyone. And it ends up earning him the name Reaper. And that leads on to a whole other thing as soon as we get into the other books. But having him be this dark, angry, borderline, evil protagonist where he is, so stuck in his hatred that he can't see past it. He's just, he just wants to kill these people, and he doesn't care that there might be some good to them. He just wants to kill them. He's like, you're gold. You don't deserve to live because you didn't let my wife live, and you didn't let my family have the freedom they deserve. And he has every right to think that, but at the same time, he starts to slowly learn, the more time he spends with the gold, that they're just kids, and yes, they were more privileged than he was growing up, but they're still just kids. And he, despite all the hatred he's trying to hold towards them, he's also finding out that he's capable of loving them too. So it was such an interesting dynamic to read about, and I thought this was a great opening for what the rest of the series is, because it just takes on this simple story where we're gonna put a bunch of kids in a killing field. Darrow's gonna learn that he doesn't know everything. He's a 16-year-old kid who's on a revenge path, and he doesn't actually know what this world is. And then it expands into this gorgeous political space opera when the other few books come along, and it's incredible, really. It's just, I could talk about these books for days, because honestly, they're so mesmerizing, and Pierce Brown is incredibly talented in everything he's created, and I'm excited to read the rest of the series based on how these first 3 books have gone. So at the end of Red Rising, Darrow is basically sponsored by the man who killed his wife, who basically pulled the lever to hang her, Augustus, and he is offered something very, very crucial that he can't really turn down. So now when we're going into Golden Sun, we're still with that angry Darrow, but he's more accepting of his situation. He's more like, he's a bit more mature now. He's more level-headed, he's more politically knowledgeable. But I can say that the first half of this book was so frustrating for me. Not because there was anything wrong with it, but because seeing people talk down to Darrow and treat him like crap for 90% of the second book, it was hard to read at some points, because they treated him like he was dirt and like he was stupid. But it was so important at the same time to show that even though he's a gold in a room full of golds, there's this hierarchy between these people. Like, there's a hierarchy in the hierarchy. The golds have a hierarchy between each other. They look down on each other. They have slurs for each other. When it gets to that level, it's very complex, and he is beginning to understand how much he doesn't understand. And that's where I think Golden Sun really shines. It's really it's taking Darrow and being like, you see where you fucked up in the last book? Look at all these consequences that are coming to get you. Because they do. They really do. Darrow is an idiot occasionally in the first book, and he makes a lot of enemies. Those enemies aren't going away anytime soon. So good luck to him in this book, because it sure fucking sucks. Golden Sun is also where we get a lot more of the point of view of the villains. We are seeing more of the society, we're seeing more of how all of this works, and we're beginning to understand that it's bigger than him. It's bigger than Darrow. Darrow isn't one man who's gonna run in and fix it all. He's a figurehead for a group that's gonna fix it all. And although he's incredibly crucial to it, it's above him. He's just a person, and his enemies are just people. So I'm just gonna read a bit of what I had wrote in my review. This book felt more philosophical to me than Red Rising. It dove more into the idea of why we are what we are, why we do this to each other, the complexity of human morality and loyalty. Are our enemies evil or just misled? It is a deeply complex plot with so many interesting stories that show that humanity is far from perfect and things need to change. But people are still people, and real pain and real fears. And with real pain and real fears. I'm really bad at reading out loud. I have dyslexia, so words don't connect well in my brain. But yeah, like, he even begins to understand the man who killed his wife, and he begins to see Augustus as less of this monster and more of this exhausted man who's working for this society. Like, there's one of the quotes that he says, when thinking about Augustus, Darrow says, "There's no morality to him, no goodness, no evil intent when he killed Io. He believes he is beyond morality. His aspirations are so grand that he has become inhuman, and in his desperate desire to preserve humanity. So he realizes at one point that these people, they're just trying to keep what they love alive. They only know the society. If that's the only world you know, you're gonna protect it. And the same thing starts to go on with Cassius in this book. Cassius is hunting Darrow. He is trying to kill Darrow no matter what. Even like disregarding all the friendship they had in the first book, it doesn't matter. Darrow is a threat to him now, and a threat to his society, so he's going to kill him, and that's all that matters. And it brings out a lot of really interesting dynamics throughout the book of characters shifting sides and starting to become the mature people that they need to be for the rest of the story, rather than the kids they were in the arena. So more thinking about the fact that these kids aren't the kids they were in the arena anymore. This is what Darrow says about himself at one point. But that man is gone. I mourn his passing every day, forgetting more and more of who I was, what dreams I held, what things I loved. The sadness is now numb, and I carry on despite the shadow it casts over me. So Darrow in Golden Sun is dark. He is past the point of revenge, it almost feels like, and he's in it to destroy. And he goes back and forth where he's like, I understand that I need to preserve this society and not kill everyone, and I understand that these people, these gold people, they're just people like me. They're just given a higher status. But he's beginning to understand that, but at the same time, every time he's reminded of what was done to him and what these gold represents, he goes back to his destruction, and he wants to kill them, and he wants to do anything he can to ruin what they've created. He walks into a hall, like where all the golds were meeting for a council meeting, basically, with a bomb strapped to his chest, planning to kill himself. He was going to be a suicide bomber for his rebellion, and he walks in there and he's about to do it, and then he's just like, I can't, like, this isn't right. There's so many people in this room who are innocent. They just happen to be gold. And that was a really big character moment for him. That was a really big moment in the story overall. I teared up really hard at that scene, as I did for a lot of this book. So it was a really beautiful thing to have in this story, was this idea of realizing that they're just people and he's just a person too. And I know I say that a lot, but that's really what the story ends up being about. Now I will quickly read what I wrote about my goblin child, Severo, because he is the shining light of this entire series. He is my beautiful baby boy, and I love everything about him, and he deserves everything. And I know he's a dick in Morningstar, but when is he not a dick? So, Severo plays an even more prominent role in this book, which makes me so fucking happy. He also takes on a complex character arc as he begins to understand what war really means for him and everyone around him. Severo's loyalty to Darrow as his closest friend, and his genuine love and acceptance of both sides of Darrow make a beautiful found family and friendship. Severo is one of the first people to find out that Darrow is a red, and this was my favorite scene maybe in the series, where we had this real moment of male bonding, where they were just saying that they loved each other no matter what, and that they would do anything for each other no matter what, and there was nothing romanticized about it. It was just, he was there for him, and it was such a good scene, and that made me cry too. So, but Severo gives me so much happiness because he stuck by Darrow no matter what. And he stuck by Darrow, especially when he figured out he was a red, because he was like, oh, you're not a privileged bitch like the rest of them. So seeing his genuine love for Severo and his love for Darrow, and his love in return for Darrow, it was just wholesome and it was great. And Darrow's just fucking hilarious too. Or not Darrow. Darrow's funny. Severu's hilarious. So I love him. And another one of my favorite characters in Golden Sun is Viktor. She also owns my heart. And the fact that they get married in Morningstar, I didn't see it coming, but I was happy when it did. So Viktor is chaotic, sassy, brilliant, and severely underused, honestly. I think she should have been more prominent in Golden Sun than she was. I feel like she would have figured out everyone's plans and not let Darrow be an idiot the multiple times he was an idiot. So maybe the end of the book wouldn't have happened if Viktor was more involved. Because God, the end of the book. A really interesting thing we get in this book is the class that's basically lower than Reds, which is Obsidian. And this is brought in through the character Ragnar that Darrow finds on a ship that he overtakes. And Ragnar basically is like, you overtook the ship, I am at your service, and Darrow is just kind of like, cool, what do you want to do? And this is so confusing for Ragnar because he's never been like allowed to think about what he wants and what makes him happy. So having someone ask him this was really shocking, and he is another beautiful character that I love so much and that I'm so glad was in this series. He really made for a lot of really beautiful scenes, and he deserves so much. What I said about him was Ragnar joins our little crew about halfway through the book. He's a powerful Obsidian who takes to Darrow because he sees him almost as a kind and merciful god in the beginning, but a friendship blossoms from there, and Darrow places a lot of trust in the tortured yet loving man. I realized I used the wrong there. That's what happens when you write a review at 3 in the morning. So now we're gonna get into the ending, because I kid you not, I cried for the last 100 pages. So I finished Golden Sun, and I don't think there was a single moment in the last 100 pages where I wasn't teared up the entire time. And I don't know how I feel about the ending yet. I think I feel good about it because it affected me so much. But yeah, I'm not excited to start Morningstar. I'm not ready. That's all for tonight. I cried of sadness, cried a bit of joy, and then fucking devastation for the rest of the ending. Because oh my god, I can't even really remember what happened in that red wedding-esque scene at the end where they were all like celebrating, and then Cassius and Roke and everyone just showed up and annihilated everyone. We had found out who Ares was, and he's Severo's father, and we were all like, that's amazing, like this is so great, we have this rebellion together now, like everyone's on the same side, everyone we care about is together and they want to do these brilliant things. And then we have this moment at the end where everyone, Augustus, Ares, like my hand didn't move. Augustus, Ares, Viktor, Darrow, everyone at the table is annihilated. And when I thought Viktor was dead, the devastation I felt, because they had stabbed her right through the spine, and so I was like, there's no coming back from that, like she's gone. And she was one of my favorite characters in the book, so it was very emotional for me. But she does continue on into the next book, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this ending was so flooring to me. I didn't want to read Morningstar for the first 5 hours after I finished Golden Sun. I was like, I'm not reading Morningstar. Like, I can't do this. And the next day I started Morningstar, obviously, but I was so emotionally distraught with this ending. And it's something I can't really tell you what happens, because I don't even really remember what happens. I was just so in shock. And so I highly suggest reading Golden Sun and crying with the rest of us who've read that ending, because wow, it happened. Finally, we go on to the last book in the trilogy, which is Morningstar, which I rated all these books a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads, but in a ranking system of the 3 books, it would be Red Rising, Golden Sun, Morningstar. Morningstar is fucking incredible. It is everything I could ask for in this kind of story, and it's everything I want to write in my own story. So at the end of Golden Sun, Darrow is captured and brought to the Jackal's base, where he basically torments him for 9 months, and he is absolutely destroyed mentally. He is turned back into a red, he is weak, he is beaten, he is mentally tortured. He is this broken man at the beginning of Morningstar, which was so different than the victorious, proud Darrow we saw at the end of Golden Sun, right before the events of the ending happened. So we start to realize that he's breaking, and he's not gonna be able to keep the secrets of where his friends are hiding out and where the rebellion is and who's a part of the rebellion from Jackal for much longer, because he's losing his mind. He's seeing Io in a cell, he's talking to her, she's being there and being this overwhelming presence for him. And so he realizes that he's going crazy, and he decides to commit suicide before the Jackal can take anything from him. And he tries, and he's banging his head off the wall trying to crush his own skull, and he gets raised up on a platform, brought into the Jackal's throne room, and mocked by the entire hall, except for Cassius, who seems to be the only one in the room horrified by the fact that Darrow was kept in a hole for 9 months. I don't know if he was kept in the hole for the whole 9 months, but he was in this pit with no light for at least 3. So Cassius's reaction actually surprised me. He was genuinely distraught over seeing Darrow being tortured like this, and he argued against it when he saw him, and he checked on him, which shows that Cassius isn't like these other people. He's not enjoying the pain inflicted on Darrow. He's doing what he's doing out of honor, and that is really important to his character throughout this entire. Again, I'm just going to do a lot of reading from the review that I already wrote, just because it gets everything, all the points that I want to make, a lot more concisely than I can just say. So one thing this book explores very well is the effect of trauma on those who have been afflicted by it. The anger, pain, sadness, and aggression it leaves behind in a person. We see it in Darrow, Victor, Severo, Holiday, Sephi, Mustang, and everyone. Everyone has their moment. The war is destroying the lives of everyone Darrow loves, and Darrow has come to terms with the fact that he is the one who brought the war to them, and has to accept the weight, but not blame himself. We watch Darrow's friends die off one by one, leaving him emptier and emptier with every passing, exhausted by the weight of it all. Severo, in his own pain, is an adversary in himself for a while before Darrow can be there to comfort him, similar to how Darrow changes at the end, trying to keep people away so he can focus on the war and not what he could lose, but they come to him anyways as Darrow comes to Severo. This is a story about grief, societal degradation, war, family, and love, and how we see ourselves. Pierce Brown takes the mask off monsters and shows us the humanity and pain behind the evil. We understand our enemies and our villains that are given to us, and we feel for our characters who have defected to opposing sides. This was more specifically about Roke in this instance, because the scene where they catch up with Roke towards the middle, towards the end, honestly made me really emotional. I have loved these characters through every book so far, but in Morningstar, my love for them really hit the hardest because I realized that I could, like, knowing Pierce Brown now at the end of Golden Sun, he's pulling no stops, and I knew I could lose characters that I loved, and I did. And I cried, specifically when Ragnar died. I was not expecting it. It was very sudden, and I was just like, oh my god, Ragnar's dead, and he just got introduced in the last book. How is he dead? And it was very startling to me, but he does die in the book, and I'm hoping you've read them all if you're at this point in the video. But this book really delves into the characters and the politics and the fact that what's going on has an effect on them, and it has an effect on the people around them. Now, war isn't this glorious thing, it's really horrible. And I think Golden Sun goes into that a bit more than Morningstar, where it shows the violence of war, where it's like showing how visceral it is, and that it's not fun to fight, it's terrifying, because you know you could never see the people, there's a chance that you'll never see the people you love again at the end. And now they have people that they love, that they're fighting for, and they don't want to lose them to this. So Morningstar basically picks up where Golden Sun left off, but Darrow has more of a fleet now. He's preparing to take down the Sovereign and just kind of destroy parts of the society that he can destroy without breaking everyone as a whole. He has to take apart the corrupt part of society and replace it with something good. And I'll get to what he replaces it with at the end. But this is a lot more space battle, a lot more war from a distance. Like, this is more ships fighting than person-to-person fighting, which is fine by me. That was honestly a really intense action book. Like, I don't find car chases or big metal ship go pew pew very exciting most of the time, but it worked for me here, so good for you. As usual, when I talk about any book, I'm going to go straight to the characters because I am a character reader, and very little much else matters to me in a book other than the characters. So I wrote quite a lot about these characters. It's time to share them with you. Darrow is one of the most complex protagonists I've ever had the pleasure of reading about. He starts as a foolish, violent, hateful boy and grows into a wise, intelligent, and caring man who understands the world around him. He builds a life with the people he loves and watches it break apart numerous times, but always comes back to hold it together. He shines in this book. He has a deep understanding of death and what it costs and how it changes everything he does. Severo begins as a tyrant, traumatized after the loss of Darrow, and terrified to lose anyone else. He decides to become worse than the enemies he faces. More cruel, more hateful, but as time goes on, he sees what that path leads him to as it falls apart around him, and is healed by the love of his friends and Viktor, learning to let go of his rage and understand what needs to be done. So Severo had a really complex and very sad arc in this book. He had a lot of moments. I think one of the moments that got me the most was both where he, towards the end, they have Cassius as a prisoner, and the ship goes crazy at one point and decides to kill Cassius. And so they're hanging him, and Severo is encouraging it and saying, what do we do to murderers? Because Cassius is a murderer. He killed Severo's father. And the crowd is like screaming, we kill them. So Severo pushes him off the edge and hangs him. And then Severo climbs up on the edge and says, I have killed thousands of gold. I've killed this many grays. I've killed this many reds. I've killed this many obsidian. So what does that make me? And the crowd is kind of like confused and basically just seeing him as a hero. He's their Ares now. And then he says, I'm a murderer too, and he wraps the rope around his neck and he jumps. And it was horrifying for me, but I respected it. Like, I don't think anything could have been more powerful imagery for this rioting crowd than seeing the fact that each side is one and the same. They're both killers. They're both fighting for something that they believe is right. And it was an intense moment, and probably one of the best moments in literature that I've ever read. And I'm glad that it came from my favorite character. Viktor deserves a whole book to herself. She is complex, passionate, loyal, wild, and honestly an incredible character to follow. In the end, she does get the revenge she hunts for, but it is her love with Severo that actually brings her happiness, and her loyalty to her friends. She is more vulnerable and powerful in Morningstar than in any book in the Red Rising trilogy. Cassius was a surprise to me. I had always secretly hoped he would come back and understand why Darrow had to kill Julian. He shows his true nature in Morningstar not as a villain, but as an honest man protecting the world he understands from people who feel like threats. After he is captured, Darrow protects him, and slowly they slip back into their old friendship, realizing they still love each other in their own broken ways. His arc was probably my favorite of the book. There was so much pain and growth in him. Mustang also comes back to play her wise and essential role in the war, eventually siding with Darrow after he shows her that he wants to build a better world. But she doesn't stop challenging him. She pushes him to his limits, demanding he be a better man than any other, because he has to be, and because she is always right. With the reveal at the end that she has given birth to Darrow's child and is hiding him to protect him from their enemies, I'm sorry, I'm still not over that. I'm still not over that ending. From their enemies, her intentions of testing and pushing Darrow become clear. She is seeing if he is fit to father her son and make the world a better place. Ragnar also had a beautiful arc in Morningstar, becoming the gentle, loving giant, as well as the warrior. He bonds with all the children in lower colors and is seen as a friend to all. His love and kindness is cut short when Aja kills him near the middle of the book, and he dies in front of his silent sister and Darrow, who is deeply shaken by the loss of his best friend. But it is his belief in peace that drives Darrow onwards to build the world that Ragnar hopes to see. I bawled when he told Darrow he'd build a house next to Io and wait for him in the Vale. That is not a lie. I listened to the last book on audiobook. Incredible performance. I highly suggest it. And I heard the part where Ragnar died, and I literally stopped doing dishes and just laid down on the kitchen floor and just stayed there. So yeah, it affected me. So how this trilogy ends is they win the war, just barely. And the way that they decide to handle this is not to completely destroy Gold Society, but rather to put a better figurehead at the front of it. So he makes Mustang the sovereign, and so all these gold know that this is what they're supposed to follow, so they follow more easily rather than continuing the war for another 10 years. Doing this, he is still enabling the idea that there's a hierarchy with the golds, but he's slowly dismantling it because he can't dismantle it all at once or society will fall apart. So I thought that was really smart, because we've seen what major societal events do to people. People become crazy and confused and scared and do violent things when they're scared. That's happening right now in our world. And so I thought it was really good for an author to not just have it end and have their protagonist completely win and get their way. They have to compromise for it, because it's not about good versus evil. It's about, we need to make people understand what would be better for everyone. So I thought the way Pierce Brown wrote this ending was honestly so good, and it deserves so much praise. So if you haven't read the Red Rising trilogy yet, I highly suggest it, and I think you should read it immediately. So that'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I am extremely out of breath because that was a lot of talking, and I don't talk this much ever. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you read Red Rising. I hope you love it as much as I do, because this is honestly one of my favorite series now. And I hope you also have a lovely day. I'm sure I will be making another moving vlog video when I move. And stay safe.